Hello, Patreon supporters. This is my first benefit reading for Tier 3 supporters. And I am going to be reading from Chapter 2 of my book, The Counterfeiter's Daughter, which is available at all major book retailers. So if you have not picked up a copy, that is available in both ebook and paperback. So let's get started. Chapter 2. Lufthansa flight LH453 departed on time for a non-stop flight from Los Angeles to Munich. 5 hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed for the many passengers asleep. Madeline finished her second cup of coffee and tapped her nails on the tray in front of her until she caught an unpleasant glare from the woman across the aisle. She folded up the tray and rubbed her lower back, wishing she spent extra money on business class. Tightening muscles aggravated the swirling sensation in her head, along with the stench of fish and chicken that sickened her stomach. She dug in her handbag for bottled water and Dramamine. The back of her hand brushed against the letter, and she reread the note a few times. Her actions were rash, and she hadn't given a lot of thought to anything. Never mind the emotional consequences of a spontaneous decision she had planned, no details for traveling to a foreign country. She figured she'd use a credit card for most transactions and stop at a cash machine for a little currency. Madeline closed her eyes, accepting she set in motion a journey into a forbidden territory of the past, and there was no turning back. The plane landed around 7 p.m. after an 11-and-a-half-hour flight. A stabbing pain in her abdomen set her internal clock spinning in two directions. Pulling her carry-on down from the overhead compartment, Madeline swayed with the weight of her suitcase. Regaining her balance, she squeezed into the right line departing the plane. Strong peppermint and lingering floral perfume assaulted her nostrils. She twitched her nose and blinked to clear the watery blur from her vision. Straining to focus with a sluggish shuffle into Terminal 2, the group of passengers from the airplane broke free and dispersed through the crowds. Madeline stepped aside and extended the handle of her suitcase. Franz Josef Strauss Airport bustled with fast-paced travelers. The reality of her hasty decision settled in after spending an hour in customs, where she overheard two airline attendants chat in German. She grazed her teeth along her lower lip and tried to recall common phrases she learned in high school, but doubted her ability to carry on an everyday conversation. Even worse, she missed her chance to brush up on the language skills during the flight. She pulled her burgundy sweater around her hips and straightened the hem. All she wanted was a heavy dose of caffeine so her body functions normalized. Madeline created a mental list to gain control of her circumstances. First, she'd get a strong cup of coffee and something to eat. Second, stop by a shop in the airport for a map, an essential travel guide including a section on useful German phrases. Then, take care of currency and locate her hotel. The subtle aroma of cocoa and toasted nuts stimulated her senses as she fought to push through the fog of jet lag. With poised posture, she strolled to the next terminal and tackled her number one priority. Madeline waited in line for coffee. Eating dinner would help her body adjust to the proper time zone, but her mouth salivated for breakfast food. She patted down her pockets, then dug in her bag looking for her phone. Idiot! She tossed her hand up in the air and smacked it against her thigh. She forgot her phone on the nightstand at home when she charged it after work. So far, her careless mistakes created major consequences, and she'd leave no room for additional errors. Madelyn stepped up to the counter. The barista greeted her along with an out-of-order note taped over the credit card machine. Sprixty Dutch English? Madelyn scrunched her nose at how horrible her supposed German sounded. Yeah, the girl smiled. Cash only? The cashier nodded and pressed her lips tight. Madelyn grumbled under her breath and slouched as she walked away. A stale taste filled her mouth, and she ate a mint that rolled around in the bottom of her purse. Madelyn maneuvered through a sea of people like a fish swimming upstream. Bags bumped her shoulders, rocking her balance. Yet she held a strong stance and ran into a convenient shop to purchase a guidebook, including a map. Thumbing through the pages of her Guide to Germany book, she unfolded the transit rail system and memorized the stops. The last thing she needed was to end up on the wrong train. It didn't appear too complicated. The U-Bahn and S-Bahn trains ran throughout the city. She traced the S8 yellow and black line with her finger to Marienplatz, the stop closest to Hotel Fusen. Under a bright green sign, a row of touchscreen kiosks attracted clusters of people. Madelyn inserted her credit card in the machine and purchased a single fare. With a ticket in hand, she followed the signage for the S-Bahn and rode down an escalator to the train platform. She waited with the large, huddled group behind the white line. A whoosh from the air brakes screeched through the enclosed station as the rapid transit arrived. The automatic doors for the red with white trim train opened and passengers hustled to any available seats or latched onto the vertical poles extending from the floor to ceiling. Madelyn charged for an empty seat, securing a victory comparable to a touchdown in a football game. She slid into a coupled lounger with luggage racks overhead. A man squeezed beside her. She tucked her carry-on behind her legs and leaned away from the smell of greasy hair. The S-Bahn bolted with a dynamic force, the rails sleek and smooth as the train bolted on the track, lurching passengers forward. With a whistling sigh, Madelyn tucked herself into the blue vinyl chair and studied the guidebook. Remember basic phrases and greetings. Sprechen Sie English, she whispered and repeated. After a 40-minute ride, Madelyn exited the electric train. Her leg muscles stiffened while she climbed the stairs leading out of the station. As she stepped out from the underground into the historic heart of Munich, her heart pounded and her adrenaline spiked, increasing her disorientation. She never dreamed she'd arrive in a destination she read about and studied in books. When Sam left, she missed her chance to study abroad and assumed traveling wasn't in her future. Munich housed many of her favorite neo-Gothic architectural buildings. She skimmed through the history in the German guidebook on the train. Ample light in the plaza showcased the brick and shell limestone structure of Neues Rathaus, New City Hall. The ornate facade towered almost 300 feet above the flagstone square. Surrounded by a crowd, heads tilted and phones pointed skyward at the glockenspiel clock and 43-bell carillon chime like an old-fashioned music box. Madelyn peered up at the luminance flashed onto mechanized life-size figures perched in the niches of the tower. A night watchman blew his trumpet on one side and an angel on the other as they jerked into action and moved behind the curved columns, bidding a good night to the city. The jaunty tune at the end of the performance drew oohs and ahs. Caught in an intersection of people scampering in several directions, she checked the map and walked a few blocks toward Hotel Fusen. Her suitcase stuck in the cobblestone street. She halted and yanked until a wheel broke. She threw her hands up and a hard breath escaped her lips as she hoisted the case along her side. The sound of oompa music lured her toward a large lit-up building named the Hofbrauhaus. She peeked through the double-wide doors at the father of all beer halls, in which trumpet, drum, and accordion blended with the singing and shouting of drinkers producing a boisterous noise. The camaraderie between the folks sitting on the wooden benches at tables long enough for seating at least 50 people brought a small smile to her face. She twisted her neck over her shoulder and faced Hotel Fusen across the street. Madeline whirled through the silver revolving doors and rolled the three-wheeler suitcase across the black and white marble floor. The long hours of travel vanquished her energy, and she utilized her carry-on as a crutch at the receptionist desk. At 10:15 at night, the lobby of the hotel brimmed with men in designer suits and women wearing cocktail dresses. Other guests arriving late swung store bags in their hands. Madeline propped her elbow on the cool granite counter and blew a loose strand of hair from her face. Behind the counter, sitting at a desk, a silver-haired man lifted his head from his leather notepad and with a severe look motioned for the employees to help. Making his silent orders with gestures, he had the workers marching to the snap of his fingers. A wide-eyed desk clerk rushed to the counter. Guten Abend. Hello, she smiled with confidence. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? He nodded and choked back a laugh. Yeah, I speak German. Her cheeks grew hot, and she fumbled with her earmarked page in her book. I meant, sprechen Sie English? I speak English too, he said and grinned. How may I help you? My name is Madelyn Brighton, and I have a reservation. The young man typed with two pointed fingers as he stared at the computer screen. I'm sorry, we have no reservation under that name. Madeline slumped forward. Is this the Hotel Fusen in Munich? Yeah. Can you please check again? She rested her cheek against her palm. Do you have the credit card you used to make the reservation? Madeline expected complications and delays during her visit, yet she persisted with her fatigue and raw nerves. No, I'm sorry. Someone else made the reservation. The last name is Healy? The conversation caught the attention of the older man behind the desk. He stood and spun on his patent leather loafers and nudged the clerk aside. I'm Herr Renault, the hotel director. How may I be of service? Gretchen Healy made a reservation for me. Gretchen Healy, sehr gut. Herr Renault emphasized the name in a loud voice as his fingers danced across the keyboard. Madeline glanced around the lobby. Blinded by a bright crystal chandelier, she blinked a few times and turned her body in the opposite direction. At the far end of the counter, a slender man in a slate-colored suit leaned and tilted his head toward Herr Renault. His ash-blonde locks draped at one length just below his contoured jawline and hid his line of vision. Her eyes followed the frantic movement of everyone and revealed him as a possible person of importance. We have a single room reserved for 5 days. Herr Renault swiped a plastic card. Here is your key for room 511. Thank you, Madeline forced a smile. I'll attend to anything you need during your stay at Hotel Fusen. Herr Renault glared at the young desk clerk and he rushed to pick up her suitcase. Oh, no, you don't need to. I insist, Miss Brighton. Herr Renault softened his tone. Too tired to question the peculiar behavior of the staff, she nodded in agreement. Either it had something to do with her or the mysterious man at the end of the counter. She glanced up, but the man had left. She shook her head. No reason to overthink anything. Ever since she received the letter from Gretchen, a coldness surged through her body that she couldn't shake. An exaggerated huff escaped her lips. The news of Sam's death, along with learning she had 2 stepbrothers, swayed her steps and hindered her regular body functions. Madeline followed the clerk to the elevators and stopped. She verified the name badge pinned on his black blazer. Thank you, Colt, but I prefer to go up to my room alone. She took her suitcase from him. If you wish. Colt held the automated doors open. I appreciate your assistance. She entered the vacant elevator. As the metal doors slid together, a black wingtip shoe stepped forward and triggered the retracting doors. Madelyn's body jolted with the thump of the elevator. Oui, bitte. The man that stood at the edge of the counter gave her a single nod. Colt stepped aside and turned toward Madelyn. He begged your pardon. Of course. Madelyn licked her dry lips and swallowed. You are Amerikanen? The man stated in fluent English, consonants crooning with his German accent. Madelyn squirmed inside her sweater. The man towered beside her average height. Yes, I'm an American. Her words were taut and quiet. She kept her eyes fixed on the sliding doors as they squealed shut. The number 7 illuminated on the operation panel as she pressed the button. What for? 5, please. She pulled her handbag close. 2 was a crowd in the confined space. She inhaled the mixed scent of cedar with a subtle hint of bergamot in his cologne. First visit to Deutschland? Yes, I'm here for a funeral. She snapped her mouth shut. Why did she divulge that information? My condolences. Madelyn stared upward. Thank you. The floor numbers sequentially lit up. 3, 4, 5. She sighed at the sound of the ding. The pulley shuddered to a stop, and the brushed steel squeaked open. Bisbatte. Madelyn stiffened her neck and stepped out of the elevator, towing her suitcase. The doors glided inward, and she glanced at the man. His chin tilted downward, his gray eyes peering under his narrowed brows. See you soon. He disappeared behind the closing elevator. Madelyn shivered. What a bizarre encounter. She hurried and found her room halfway down the gold-veined white marble hall. Fumbling with her key card, she slipped the smooth plastic into the slot, then yanked it out at least 3 times before the green lights flashed for entry. The door slammed after entering, and she jumped. She didn't want to acknowledge the fact the man in the elevator set her on edge. Taking a deep breath, she exhaled with controlled breathing and repeated the anxiety-reducing technique she often taught clients. Her nasal cavities filled with the scent of bleach and a lavender deodorizer. She opened the bifold closet, removed her coat, and hung it on the non-removable hangers. Wrenching off her ankle boots, her swollen feet ached with the pressure of walking to the end of the bed. She tossed her suitcase onto the bench and laid out her pajama along with a second pair of shoes. Madelyn crossed the room to shut the drapes. Down below on the street, people filtered in and out of the Hofbrauhaus. She did travel to Germany on a moment's notice. She rubbed the back of her neck. Sam crept into her mind. What led him thousands of miles away from her and Mom? So many things she wanted to say, confront him about and his choices, and now she tugged the curtains hard, shutting out the city, massaging the constricting pain in her chest. She slowed her breathing, inhaling and exhaling. She refused to get emotional. She slipped under the heavy duvet and the bed, then thrusted her head onto the pillow. 15 years should have been enough time for her to prepare for a rehash of the past. Her abdomen cramped, and she curled into a fetal position. Cheryl's promise of prayers gave her solace. Madelyn wished she could believe in the power of prayer right now. She needed all the possible help in the universe. Madelyn forfeited God when Sam left and when Mom died. Her doubts proved justified and realistic. She expected nothing from prayers. She pulled the covers over her head and closed her eyes. Well, thank you for sitting through that. I know that ended up being almost all of chapter 2. So thank you for sitting with me and listening. I hope it piqued your interest, and if so, the link is provided in down below. And I will just share a little insight there. When Madelyn arrives at the hotel and she is nervous about speaking German, her basic German skills that she has not used since high school, so many years, and she keeps repeating phrases to herself prior to getting to the hotel. That is actually drawn from a personal experience of mine. I have many family members that speak fluent German, and I have very minimal basic skills in speaking the language. So when I visited in 2019, I kept repeating in my head to make sure I would say the correct phrase, but my dad had a tendency to walk around and say "Sprechen Sie Deutsch," and that is exactly what came out of my mouth when I approached the clerk at the hotel and asked him if he spoke German. And so when I returned home, I actually added that into my first draft that I had already written, but I just thought it was something that was fitting for her, and just a little embarrassing moment that you can have when you travel abroad. So, yep, that is from my own personal experience. I just thought I'd share that with you, which I have not told anybody that. So this is just a little insight for you. So thank you once again for supporting me as a patron, and for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to another reading. Thank you so much. Bye for now.